it's Ashley Bookishram, and I am back with another video. Today I am here for our mid-June wrap-up. I cannot believe we are almost, or not almost, we are in the middle of June. That is mind-blowing. This year, thank goodness, is flying by. So I am here to kind of discuss the books that I have read. Typically in my mid-month, I think I've usually read a little bit more than what I'm going to be talking about today, but the books that I have read so far this month have all been a little bit longer, so that makes sense as to why it's going to be a shorter wrap up. Now, if you guys don't know, I end up doing my stats for my final wrap up. I don't do for mid-month, but I do just say like I've read 7 books so far, and most of them have been on audio. Actually 6 out of the 7 were on audio. So audio has been the thing right now, and audio was a thing too because of me having my daughter, but now with her being in daycare and us getting into the swing of things, hopefully I can transition back into reading physical books, but we'll talk about that a little bit more at the end of the video. So the first thing that I read so far this month was Hood Feminism by Mikki Kendall. Of course, I've already done a full review on this. Mikki Kendall uses this book as a way to talk about intersectionality and how that plays an important role in mainstream feminism, and how mainstream feminism has to begin to recognize intersectionality in order to move the movement forward. I won't get into the specific details of that because you guys have already seen that review. You commented on that review, but I will make sure, if you haven't seen it, I'll make sure I link it in the card symbol above. And I ended up giving that one 5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read, All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson, is another book that I've already done a full review for, and it is included in that video that I talk about intersectionality in. This is a young adult nonfiction memoir by George where he talks about his experience as being Black and queer. It's written as a collection of essays. It's brilliantly done, beautifully done. I won't get into the specifics because I've already talked about everything that I loved about this book, but I did end up giving this one 5 out of 5 stars as well. So the next one that I listened to was my first Case and Calendar book, and I checked it out from Libro FM. I am a part of their early librarian program where, as a librarian, I get access to their audiobooks for free as they release. I do have a code that you can use to get your first month from Libro FM for free, and I'll leave that down below. Don't feel obligated to do it. It's just they gave me a reference code to share if anybody does want to use it. What is so great about Libro FM is that it is in support of independent bookstores, so you can choose where you want that, what independent bookstore you want that money to go to. So if you're interested in new ways to support your independent bookstores, I would recommend checking them out. King and the Dragonflies is a almost coming of age story about a young man by the name of King, and it takes place in the bayou of Louisiana. It is not a spoiler, but King's brother has passed away prior to the novel beginning, and King is adamant in his belief that his brother Khalid has shed his skin and has become a dragonfly, and that Khalid visits him in his dreams, and he's having a tough time dealing with his brother's loss. So he wants to be able to communicate with his best friend Sandy. Unfortunately, right before Khalid dies, he tells King not to be friends with Sandy because Sandy is gay. So he inadvertently stops being friends with Sandy, but then when Sandy goes missing, King finds him in a tent in his backyard. They rekindle their friendship, and he really starts to understand more about Sandy and the household that he's living with, and it brings him to this point in his young life of trying to figure out who he is and dealing with the grief of the loss of his brother. What I loved about King and the Dragonflies is that it also addresses intersectionality, especially between being a Black individual and being queer, and how the relationship with the Black community and the LGBTQIA+ community has not always been great, and how this view and perspective of the LGBTQIA plus community, this negative perspective, has been passed down from generation to generation. This dislike that Khalid has of Sandy and identifying as gay, it's passed down from a troublesome relationship with his father, who has this twisted and just really disgusting perspective of the LGBTQIA plus community. So Kaysen does a wonderful job at tackling that relationship dynamic and how our prejudice and bias can be passed down from generation to generation. It's not something that just pops up, but it is something that is taught and learned, and often from family members. I also love the friendship dynamic between King and Sandy, especially watching them go from this broken relationship to building a different level of understanding and building around this theme of how far are you willing to go to help your friends. It was just beautifully written. I thought that it was a dynamic story. I know a lot of people had an emotional connection to this book. Unfortunately for me, I didn't get that emotional connection. It tugged at my heartstrings, but it didn't make me cry or anything like that. But I did really enjoy it, and I am so excited to continue to read more of Kaysen Callender's works. I just got a copy of Felix Ever After, and I have some other stuff that I've just recently purchased on my Kindle, so I can't wait to read the rest of their works. But I ended up giving this one 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was Solo by Kwame Alexander. I was so disappointed in myself that it took me this long to get to Kwame Alexander's books. He is highly recommended in our library, and I just never had the opportunity to sit down and read through some of his work. So when I saw that this audiobook was available through my library, I jumped right on it and was like, this is going to be the time that I am going to listen to a Kwame Alexander book. He writes in verse, so while the novels are long, they are easy to make it through, but I just thought that it would be interesting to listen to it on audio, especially since he was going to be the narrator. Now, Solo follows a main character by the name of Blade, and Blade is the son of Rutherford Morris, who is this washed up rock star that is dealing with heavy substance abuse. He's in and out of rehab. He does not really have a significant presence in his children's life, and Blade wants nothing to do with him. So he finds solace in his relationship with his girlfriend Chapel, but I think there was still some disconnect with the relationship between himself and his girlfriend. I think he was looking for something in that relationship with his girlfriend that he wasn't necessarily going to get. And just quite frankly, like, me being honest, I did not like Chapel as his girlfriend. I thought that she was shallow and she wasn't truly supportive, and she had her own motives for being in that relationship, and she just wasn't the support system that Blade needed in that moment. But that's just my personal, it's just my personal feelings. But Blade has a lot of trouble building this relationship with his father because his father has broken his trust so much, although his brother and his sister have a pretty decent relationship with their father because they have this understanding of his substance abuse as being a disease and not necessarily him just being reckless and careless. Blade does not have the same feeling, so his relationship with his father is a lot more strained, and that's what I love that Kwame Alexander does in this book, is that it brings forward that conversation of substance abuse and how it relates to mental health issues or health issues in general, and how that conversation is often brought up, but then sometimes it's not brought up because people like to automatically assume that if you have a substance abuse problem, that automatically makes you a bad person, an irresponsible person, instead of treating it like the illness that it is. So Blade has a tough time working around trying to understand how his father functions, not only just as a human but as a parent. The first half of the novel really builds up the tempo of this relationship, and the second half of the novel really focuses on this family secret that Blade discovers, and he ends up taking a trip to Ghana to learn more about his family and more about himself. And for me, that's where the novel really soared and really actually just picked up and had so many interesting aspects. it really became a dynamic work of art when you see the transformation that Blade makes from the time that he's at home to the time that he's in Ghana, and he learns so much about himself. It was just really great character development. I would highly recommend listening to this one on audio for the simple fact that this is about musicians. Blade also plays guitar and his father is a musician, and when Blade writes music and performs his music, there's actually full-length tracks on the audiobook and not just little snippets. Well, I didn't even expect anything, so the fact that there were full-length tracks included was just so good. There was one particular song at the end of Solo that was just so good. It was such a brilliantly written song, and I listened to it about 3 or 4 times before I turned the audiobook back in, but it was great. So if you do end up picking up this book, definitely check out the audio version if you have access to it. And I ended up giving this one 4 out of 5 stars. So the next book that I listened to was Not So Pure and Simple by Lamar Giles, and I was very surprised by this novel. It came out this year. I can't remember what month, but it came out this year, and I was like, oh, okay, this is gonna be a cute little like YA contemporary. This is Lamar Giles' first, you know, dip into the contemporary area, because I think if I'm not mistaken, he writes YA mystery. So I was like, it's not gonna be like a big deal or anything like that, and I was so wrong. So this book is about Dell, who has this crush on this girl named Kiera. He's had a crush on her since they were in kindergarten. He's like obsessed with her, and she always has a boyfriend. She's like a serial dater, and then all of a sudden her and her latest boyfriend break up, and Dell feels like he has the opportunity of a lifetime to finally date Kiera, and everybody wants to be with her, but he's gonna get into this opportunity. They go to the same church, and he volunteers to be a part of this group without realizing that it's a purity club. So I was like, this is gonna be funny. But what this book is about is addressing toxic masculinity and the lack of sex education in schools and how religion ties into all of that. So this book packed a punch, and at first I was like, even when you watch my vlog, you'll see me say like, this is more like a 3.5. But when I sat down and I really thought about it, and the reason why I was going to give it a 3.5 is because Dell is not a likable character, and if you read this book, you'll understand why. He's very pushy. He doesn't listen, and he keeps thinking that he knows everything about Kiera without really knowing her. And that plays a huge role into everything, and everything does come full circle at the end. But I was so surprised at everything that was addressed. There are these group of, and it's not a huge spoiler or anything like that, I wouldn't do that, but there is this pact that's made supposedly amongst these teenage girls at Dell's school, and they say that they've made a pregnancy pact, and these girls ended up pregnant. And what is so interesting about that, just as an example of one of the things that's addressed, is that when young women get pregnant, and it's not in the stereotypical way of marriage and then having a baby, or it being a man and a woman, or whatever the case may be, the woman gets talked about. And it's so interesting, especially when it comes to a male and female relationship, and they're not married, and the woman has a child out of wedlock. There's this stigma that is placed on the woman that the men never have to deal with. And that for me was very interesting, because I am a single mother, and I know how it feels to have that stigma of, well, you're not married. And I live in the South, so I live in the Bible Belt, if that gives you kind of a clue. So I get that. I got that. I was like, okay, yeah, I feel that, because I get that look like, oh, you're a single mother. Where's your husband? There is no husband. So you're not married? No. So how does that work? What do you mean, how does it work? So stuff like that, you would think in 2020, like, stuff like this wouldn't happen, but it happens every day. So I think I just connected with this novel in a personal way, but I just couldn't give it 5 stars, because Dell, even though I knew Lamar's intention with Dell and what Dell was supposed to stand for, reading him was just for me, it was like a trigger. It was very triggering to retell as a character. So I only ended up giving this one 4 out of 5 stars, but it really made me want to check out more stuff by Lamar Giles. So I think I probably will be looking at his backlist soon to see what else he has available. The next book that I read was Nana Volume 5. I will not talk about this one because this is the 5th volume in the series, and it is a josei manga. It is about these 2 women, both of them named Nana. They both end up in Tokyo for their own personal reasons. They build this close relationship. One is more mature than the other. One is in a band. One is still trying to pick up the pieces of her life. And this is one of my favorite manga series of all time. It's older. It went on hiatus in 2009. I am pretty sure that Ayazawa is never going to finish it. So I think there's a little over 20 volumes. And I think this year just needs to be the year that I finish it, because I just love of my life and I still haven't finished it, because I just keep holding out this hope that maybe one day she will finish it, and it's not gonna happen. I need to let it go. But I did end up giving this volume a 5 out of 5 stars. And the last thing that I've read this month so far is Catherine House by Elizabeth Thomas. If you follow me on Twitter, you know I have been begging people all week. Like, I started this book this week and I finished it in a couple days. I listened to it on audio. I've been begging people on Twitter and Instagram, asking them if they had ever heard of Catherine House, if anybody had read it, what were their thoughts, because I was confused the entire book. The entire book, I was confused. I hated it. I thought it was awful. I don't know how people got through this book. I don't know why I didn't just DNF the book. I wasted 11 hours of my time that I'm never going to get back. And it is the most aggravating thing. So Catherine House is essentially about this school that students go to, that they commit their life to for 3 years, and the school promises to educate them and to make them these powerful and successful people. But in the 3 years that they spend at this house, they can't contact family, they can't go anywhere, they don't watch TV, they don't listen to the radio. All they have are the individuals at this house and these teachers and the house itself. And when you read that premise, you're like, oh gosh, this sounds so spooky. It's gonna be so gothic, so atmospheric, and it takes place at a boarding school. Yeah, I thought the same thing. And at first, the way that Thomas builds up the atmosphere of the house and how everybody functions, how people get along, what the classes look like, this haunting feeling. And I was like, oh, this is gonna be so good. And then Inez, who is the main character, I have never disliked a character as much as I disliked her. I don't know what Thomas's intention was with Inez. She, to me, just felt like she was in a daze, or maybe like just a drunken stupor, or even a haze the entire novel. It didn't make sense. She literally slept with everyone at the school, which is fine. You know, I'm here, whatever you want to do, that's on you. I don't, but it just felt like nothing had a purpose. I didn't know why she was really at the school. I got what was going on in her past and why she wanted to escape from her past. But then when she got to the school, I don't get what she was doing there, because she wasn't functioning. So because she wasn't functioning, there was really nothing happening. And because she was always drunk and having sex with someone, that's what the book felt like. I felt like I was hearing about her not going to class, getting drunk, and having sex. And that was it. And then even when the big reveal came, the whole big mystery, I don't think the author explained it well enough. So even then it was like, well, I still don't get it. So if you enjoy books that are kind of like atmospheric gothic feel with some kind of elements, it's a little science fiction-y kind of, then I would recommend trying it out. But I personally do not recommend this book. I ended up giving it 1 star. And if you know me and if you've been following my channel for years, you know I don't give out 1 stars like that. I give out 2 stars like they're candy. But 1 stars? that's a rarity, and this one definitely got it. One of the worst books of the year. I do not recommend. All right, y'all, so this is just my currently reading section. So I am currently listening to White Fragility on audio. I had already gotten up to like 60%, but then I made the decision to start back over just to do some closer examinations of some things. So I think I'm about 22% in. I am 22% in. I'm also reading White Rage. I'm about 40% into White Rage, and that one's really interesting because I think that White Fragility is very much so for white people. So my review of White Fragility is going to be very, very interesting, whereas White Rage is very much done from a historical perspective and is very much about why Black people can't seem to get a leg up. And it's not so much about us being angry, but about white people being angry that has caused a lot of things to happen. If you haven't read it, or if you are not going to be able to finish it by Juneteenth, I still would recommend picking it up because that's going to give you a lot more of a historical context. Not that White Fragility doesn't, but White Rage definitely does a better job at that because it's not necessarily for beginners. White Fragility is very much so for beginners. I want to enter the conversation about race, whereas White Rage is like, okay, I'm here, I've already done some reading, I just want to learn more about the historical context of some things. And she definitely delves a lot into historical context of a lot of things that have happened, which makes the text a little bit more dense. Not so much for me because I was a history major in undergrad, so I'm used to reading historical texts like that. But that one may be a little bit more of a difficult read for people, and you may have to take your time a little bit more with that one. I am also reading Check Please. I know so many people were so excited to hear that I had checked this out from the library and that I was reading it. I'm 137 pages in, so probably about halfway through it, and it's so good. I'm really, really enjoying it. I'm really, really enjoying this, and I cannot wait to pick up the second book. I know someone had commented on, I think, my currently checked out, that this is actually also available as a webcomic, which is how it started, right? As a webcomic. Y'all will correct me if I'm wrong. I also am kind of still delving into Food Wars Volume 8 and Food Wars Volume 9 because those were on my TBR, and the last thing that I am currently reading right now is Stamped from the Beginning because I need to have part 1 read by Juneteenth, which is not a lot. It's only 60 pages. So I won't be finishing Stamped from the Beginning by the end of June because the read-along for that one goes into July, but I do need to have that first section done because they're having a live show as well. So there's 2 live shows that are happening on Friday. I'm gonna have to figure that out. All right, y'all, so that is it. That is my mid-month wrap-up. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you're interested in seeing more content from me, click the subscribe button, hit the bell for notification. Remember, I upload videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday with the occasional surprise video here and there, sometimes on a Saturday or a Sunday. It all depends. To let me know what you've read so far this month in May. I would really love to know, and tell me what you've liked and what you haven't liked. I'm always interested in what other people are reading because that's how I get recommendations too. All right, y'all, I'll be back with another video soon.